2001 were forever ingrained in your minds. And the voice you just heard was Kevin Cosgrove with one of the final 911 calls from the 105th floor. I'd like to welcome you all to today's dedication and call up Chief of Department John Colucci for the introduction of Commissioner Ridenour.
On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Mount Laurel Firefighters Foundation, Deputy Chiefs Todd Evans, Chris Burnett, and Lieutenant Dan Bukovic, I am Chief John Colucci, and welcome you to today's ceremony. Please welcome Commissioner David Ridenour for the introduction of colors.
Good morning. On behalf of the Board of Fire Commissioners, Chief of Department John Colucci, and the entire Mount Laurel Fire Department, I would like to thank our distinguished guests, elected officials, members of the public, friends and family, and all of our first responders for attending today's dedication of the Mount Laurel Firefighters Foundation September 11th, 2001 Never Forget Memorial. Excuse me. At this time, please rise and direct your attention to the Lenape High School Junior ROTC for presentation of colors for today's ceremony.
Forward, forward. Detail, attend, hut! Right wheel, march! Full guard, halt! Present, arm!
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Order, arm. Right turn, march. Forward, march.
Thank you, Battalion Chief John Laurel of the Philadelphia Fire Department.
I'd like to invite Mount Laurel Police Department Chaplain Eric Jarvis to the podium, please.
Please join me for a prayer. Almighty God, you are our hope and our refuge. In our distress, we come quickly to you. The shock and horror of the tragic day may have subsided, but we are still left with an emptiness that we feel on this day of memorial. God, we come remembering those who lost their lives in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. We're mindful of the sacrifice of the public servants who demonstrated the greatest love of all by laying down their lives for their friends. We commit their souls to your eternal care, and we celebrate their gifts to a fallen humanity. As we are remembering, we come in hope. We hope for a brighter future and a brighter day as we strive with one another for peace, and we place our trust in you. So in commemorating this past tragedy today, God, we honor those that paid the ultimate sacrifice for all of us. We give you thanks for those who perished serving their fellow man, for serving their brothers, for serving their sisters, for all they have honored us with their lives. As our society foundations were once shaken, we are reminded of the security that we can have only in you, O Lord. And in our time of need, we seek you, we follow you in spirit and in truth, and we look to you for guidance and wisdom as our ultimate guardian and protector. God, I thank you for all these men and women that have gathered here today to remember those that gave their lives for us, and remember that we have a great God who protects us all. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. So please have a seat. Before I get into the official unveiling, I want to just make a quick note. On September 2nd, if I could direct your attention to the flag above my head and over my shoulder, the American flag and that 9/11 flag. On the 2nd of September 2017, just one short week ago, this American flag and the 9/11 memorial flag behind me were both flown over Iraq in support of Operation Inherent Resolve aboard an Air Force C-17 cargo plane flown from the 732nd Airlift Squadron out of McGuire Air Force Base. Both flags were again flown over Afghanistan on September 7th, 2017 in support of Operation Freedom Sentinel. Overall, these two flags in the last week have flown over 20 hours on 5 combat sorties, both over Iraq and Afghanistan. I'd like to express a sincere thank you to Staff Sergeant Loadmaster Justin Bates and the 732nd Airlift Squadron from McGuire Air Force Base for taking the time and extending the opportunity to fly our flags. Justin, could you please stand? I'd also ask if you are serving in the military at any point in time in your life, please rise. Or if it wasn't for their sacrifices and the sacrifices our brothers and sisters throughout the world are making today, we wouldn't be able to enjoy ceremonies like this and the everyday freedoms we have. So once again, I welcome you, and I would officially like to present to you our September 11th, 2001 Never Forget Memorial. This started back on September 8th of 2009 after receiving an email that went through the secret list, explaining that the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey was releasing steel artifacts for the construction of public memorials. On September 11th, just 3 days later in 2009, I wrote the request, and we received the steel in a ceremony just one short year later in anticipation of the 10-year anniversary of September 11th, 2001. A memorial design group was created, and all the professionals on this plaque to my right came together pro bono to get this off the ground. This was followed by the creation of the Mount Laurel Firefighters Foundation, a 501c3, and lots of support from members of the public, family members of firefighters and police officers and first responders, members of the Mount Laurel Firefighters Association, IFF Local 4408, and Mount Laurel Fire District Number 1, who graciously agreed to allow us to build this on their property. This memorial, as you listen to the traffic come by, is exactly its meaning and why it's here. It's out there for every day, for everyone who drives by to see and make sure we never forget. This memorial is reflective, although the focal point is the steel. It's reflective of all the events of September 11th, 2001. The World Trade Centers are born in the steel, as that was received out of Ground Zero and the World Trade Center complex. On the plaque, American Airlines Flight 11, United Airlines Flight 175, American Airlines Flight 77, and United Airlines Flight 93. And their description are all on the plaque. The Pentagon, and a 250-pound piece of limestone, graciously bequeathed to us in perpetuity, because you can't gift public funds and public land. So in perpetuity, we have the limestone from an exterior wall of the Pentagon. And that goes the same for Morocco, from the Flight 93 National Memorial in Stony Creek, Somerset County, Pennsylvania. Some of the design goals that we had: we wanted to make sure this was reflective of American resolve of rising back up. So the steel's rising back up and it's pointing to the north, in New York City, symbolizing that resolve. And just like President Bush said, and it's reflected on the plaque, we wanted to show the rest of the world all that's good and just in our world, and we won't be held down. We wanted you to be able to touch it, walk around it, walk under it, and just get an overall three-dimensional look at what energy and what went into that steel. The square tubes, symbolic of the World Trade Center. The Pentagon garden shape, once again, symbolic of the Pentagon and given the shape to the foundation and our country, as that's where our military and all our personnel today continue to fight for our freedoms. This memorial I vowed to the board during a tough time back in 2009 and 10. I vowed would have no impact on our operational or capital budget and be done without taxpayer dollars. And I'm proud to say we accomplished that. So with that, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank all of you, the residents, the businesses of Mount Laurel, the PTOs, the PTAs, and everybody that's reflective on this plaque that provided that support in the beginning stages and throughout, up through completion, to get this constructed. With that, I'd like to introduce Mayor Dennis Riley for a few remarks.
Thank you, everyone. And on behalf of the Township Council, I welcome all of you to this dedication of the Mount Laurel Firefighters Foundation Memorial. Never forget. We remember the many lives lost to this tragic event 16 years ago today, on a similar beautiful but horrible day. I would ask that we as Americans rededicate ourselves to always remain vigilant to the defense of our safety, security, freedoms, and liberties that we Americans treasure so very dearly. The lesson learned from that horrible day 16 years ago is that freedom is not freely given. American freedom is nurtured, protected, and preserved from terrorist enemies and evil adversaries by law enforcement and the protection of lives and property by the dedicated and professional services of our firefighters, police, EMS, and military services. To our fellow mankind, in our local community, our county, our state, and our country. One of the greatest displays of courage and heroism from September 11, 2001, in my memory, are the pictures of New York Fire Department firefighters climbing up one side of the fire escape in single file line to rescue those trapped and injured on the upper floors, going into the heat and danger displayed by this monument. While civilian workers were on the other side of the staircase, coming down to seek refuge and safety with the assistance of those firefighters. Similar acts of courage and heroism were evident at the Pentagon and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. In Mount Laurel, we are so very honored to add this beautiful 9/11 monument to the Memorial Field Monument as permanent and daily reminders of that courage and heroism demonstrated by so many of our fellow Americans 16 years ago today. As we freely go about our daily lives, going to work, school, shopping, and playing our many sports here in Mount Laurel, we will always have these visible and daily reminders of the selfless dedication, professionalism, and patriotism of our fellow Americans who have given their lives and dedicated their lives to the protection of our lives. A child born in 2001 is at the midway point of their high school years, and they're beginning to give serious consideration and discernment of their life's career and vocation. Therefore, it is the duty of us, old enough to vividly remember these horrible attacks and to never forget, and educate our youth to always consider service to our community and country as a first responder and protector in the great and noble careers of police, firefighter, EMS, and military service. It is by our dedication and service to our communities and country that we will always remain the home of the free and the land of the brave. May God forever bless Mount Laurel and the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd now like to call up Burlington County Freeholder Linda Hughes.
This is not an easy day, and that's something that's remained the same for the last 16 years. We have those memories seared in our brains, so many of us, where we were, what we were doing, how we felt. That's something that also has remained the same. But there's something that's changing now as we're reaching the 16th anniversary and further, and that's that we have this entire generation coming up now of young men and women who don't have those memories and don't recall those feelings. They either were too young or some of them weren't even born yet. So now it's up to us to share those memories that we have with them. We can talk to them about how we saw the worst of humanity that day, but we can also tell them about how we saw the best of humanity. How we saw people coming to help. We saw people lining up to donate blood. We had first responders come from all corners of the region and the country to help. My cousin was one of those firefighters that Mayor Riley mentioned going up the stairs. And when one of his brothers was having a difficult time and couldn't go any further, he helped him down the stairs. And then when the tower fell and he had to drop all of his equipment to run, one of his fellow firefighters, when he got to him, took off his mask so he could take a breath. There were people all over this county, this state, and this country who wanted to embrace each other. And when we talk to this new generation about what that day and the weeks and the months, we can tell them how it felt when all of a sudden the sky was silent. The sound of planes that we just have gotten so used to that we don't even notice anymore, but we notice their absence. And then how we felt that first time that we heard that plane in the sky again after the ban was lifted. Those are all things that they can't relate to, but they should know because it's important and it's part of what made America who we are today. So today we gather to remember those we have lost, both on that day and those we continue to lose right up until today. We honor those who survived. We thank all of the first responders who we know in a moment would do the same thing they did 16 years ago and stand between us and danger. And we're also here to vow that we will never forget. Thank you so much.
I'd like now to invite to the podium Assemblyman Troy Singleton.
Ladies and gentlemen, neighbors and friends, I had a series of prepared remarks that I was going to present to you today. But I've never heard that 911 call. And respectfully, it just seems like there's no words that I can say to you and no expression that I can give that encapsulates, I think, how we all feel. So with your kind permission, I'm going to refrain from reading a prepared statement and just tell you how touched that I am personally, not only by this great community of Mount Laurel. My friend Mayor Riley, our freeholder Linda Hughes, and others have already spoke so eloquently about what this day means. But for me, as someone who's benefited, as each of us have, for the sacrifice of the men and women of public safety, we have an enormous debt. And our debt no longer can just be about expressions of sympathy or kind words. We have to live as our first responders live, with selflessness, with humility, with a commitment to something greater than each and every one of us. A commitment that says that they are willing to give the full measure up to and including their life on behalf of people they've never met, because they've sworn an oath and an obligation to safeguard our communities. So many of us these days may have forgotten that regardless of our last names, where we worship on Sundays, we're all Americans. We're all bound and tied together, because on that hard day 16 years ago, they didn't just attack Democrats, they didn't just attack Republicans, they didn't attack a Catholic like myself or a Baptist like my grandmother. They attacked us all. And if we're going to show any sense of support and understanding, then we must live as our first responders have lived with each other. As we see so many of our young children here today, and so many of them are gracious to be with us, we should recognize that we must have a commitment to something more important than just ourselves, a commitment to each other. That is what that 911 call said to me. I heard a first responder doing anything and everything they could to rush into danger. I heard a 911 operator trying to keep calm someone in the frantic moments of what ultimately became their last moments. And as I sat yesterday thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, I thought about those individuals who on September 10th had the same feeling as I did, that nothing was happening. So as we say, we should never forget. We should always remember. But let us do more than merely remember. Let us, as I said, live as our first responders live, willing to put themselves to the benefit of their community, and let's make our communities better and stronger together. God bless you, our first responders. The one prayer that I say to you, that I say on this day and every day, may every call you have be short. May you return to a family that will be grateful for your service and a community forever indebted to your kind and heroic deeds. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. There's a lot of discussion about first responders and military personnel. Now we're going to get to where the real impact and the innocent victims of September 11th. David Pirith lives in Northfield, New Jersey now. He worked for Morgan Stanley in the World Trade Center. In 2001, he was a manager with Morgan Stanley. And he left as a vice president. I'd now like to welcome you, David Pirith.
Good morning. I appreciate everyone being here today. Like Ian mentioned, I worked for Morgan Stanley. I started there in 1996, right out of college. I worked on the 74th floor of 2 World Trade Center, which is also referred to as the South Tower. On September 11th, I was in my office, very fortunate. I had a great window office where I could see all of downtown Manhattan, out to Brooklyn. It was beautiful. Out in front of my office, just talking to a buddy of mine, and we had heard a low rumble, and the lights had flickered. And somebody from the other side of our building yelled that a plane hit 1 World Trade Center. We were not sure, well, we had no idea the extent of it, the size of the plane. We thought it was a privately owned jet plane that lost control, went into the building. And almost immediately there was smoke and paper just going by our windows. So we decided that we were going to start evacuating our staff members. We had many training set up to evacuate, so we knew we're not going to take the elevators, we were going to start going down the stairs. The further you would go down, the harder it was, the slower it got. There were more and more people. Heard over the loudspeaker, 1 World Trade is being evacuated. 2 World Trade, please stay in your office. Thankfully, I don't listen very well, so I continued to go down with a buddy of mine and a few other of our staff members. Got down to the 44th floor, and that was an area where they had a cafeteria, so we came out just to see what everyone was doing, and again, decided to go back in the stairwell and continue down. And right when we got back into the stairwell, about the 44th floor, is when the second plane hit our building. At that time, we had no idea what it was, because you were in the middle of the building, there were no windows, you couldn't see. If anything, we thought, maybe it got so bad over at 1 World Trade, it fell into ours. We had another plane flying into it, was not even a thought that we had. So, again, continued to go down, got out of the building, and when we looked up, that's when we realized that the second plane had hit us, and we had decided to run as far away from the buildings as we could in case something else happened. At that point, it was just all about getting in touch with family members, and then just getting home. I was living across the river in Bayonne, New Jersey, and many of you have heard that cell phones weren't working at the time. I just got engaged. My fiance was working in Jersey City. You could see everything going on, but I had no idea where I was. Eventually, back then, believe it or not, in 2001, there were still payphones. Each payphone had a line that wrapped around the corner, so we just continued to walk north, trying to figure out a way to get home Eventually got to a payphone where maybe there was only 15 people, so we decided to wait there and see if we can get in touch with family. And earlier, people were mentioning that how we came together as a country after that. Everybody was helping everybody, and that was immediately. Everybody in front of us heard my buddy and I talking, realized where we were, and each one of them said, you know, you guys need the phone way more than we do. Let us up in front of them so we can call our family members. Got in touch with my fiance at the time, told her to call my parents, let them know I'm okay. What I didn't think to tell her was I was a few blocks away from the World Trade Center. So within a minute of me hanging up is when my building, the Second World Trade Center, had collapsed. So at that point, I'm not thinking, but family's thinking that, you know, where was he? Was he still there? How far away is he? Is he hurt again? I guess it was probably a good 4 or 5 hours after that when I was able to get in touch with family again. Was able to take the ferry from Chelsea, which is in the mid-30s, and it took us to Hoboken, where, you know, first responders were already there. We were escorted into an area where they showered us off real quick, checked all our vitals, and then sent us off. Eventually got home that night, I guess about 8 o'clock or so, and I'm not a first responder, but I wanted to make it a point for myself that I wanted to get back to work. I wanted to keep moving forward. And the next day, I had reached out to all staff members. Wanted to make sure that everybody in our division that we worked with was okay, and fortunately, everyone that was in our department was okay. On the 13th, myself, an IT guy, and my manager went back to our contingency site to get our systems back up and running. Believe it or not, that site was also in Lower Manhattan. I was probably one of 5 people on a PATH train from New Jersey into New York. And going into Lower Manhattan, the only people that were there were the first responders. You know, that always stuck in my mind. You know, how those guys didn't skip a beat. They were there from the minute I was trying to get out, they were trying to get in and help. Kind of a neat story that I have from that, though, is about 6 months later, I received an email from a police chief from a city out in Ohio. And in the email, he had mentioned that him and a group of his guys, right after September 11th, went to help in the recovery phase. And the first day they were there, he found my business card. And what still to this day amazes me, he said he used that as motivation. He used my name as motivation. Him and his guys. If they were tired, they thought of me, and they just kept moving on. He still has that business card. They built a little museum in their police department. Ended up talking. We emailed back and forth, talked to him, and it was funny. I wasn't going to ask for it back, knowing how much it meant for him, but I did want a picture of it, and just a few pictures of the guys that helped out. So the first time I talked to him, I mentioned a business card, and he cut me off. He said, "You can't ask for it back. You can't. It means too much." So I said, "No, of course not. Just send me a few pictures." That he did. And before I finish up, there's one individual I do want to mention. His name is Rick Rescorla. You may have heard of him before. He, at the time, was head of security at Morgan Stanley. He was born and raised in England. He was a military guy there. He then moved here and fought for us in Vietnam. He's one of those guys that was just always had a calm demeanor. He was a leader. Everyone looked up to him. There was a book written about him called Heart of the Soldier. There was a documentary, you may have seen it on TV, called The Man Who Predicted 9/11. And I had mentioned before how Port Authority over the loudspeakers were telling us to go back to our office. Well, he was telling all of our employees the exact opposite. In the bombing of 93, he made it a point that he was going to be the last person to left the building. and he did that. He made sure everyone got out before he left. And his goal in '01 was to do the same thing. As you can imagine, he didn't make it out. There is a memorial dedicated to him. On September 11th, just like in '93, he had his bullhorn and just trying to evacuate and get everybody out. Kind of funny, the Port Authority went up to him and asked him to do the opposite. I don't think it's appropriate. I should not be repeating his response directly to them, but it was basically mind your own business. I'm doing my job. He was the head of a lot of the training that I received when we were at Morgan Stanley. So, something I can't forget, because that was a big part of why I'm here today. So I thank him. I thank everybody that put this memorial together. It's so important that this day isn't forgotten, and things like this, help with that. So I appreciate you inviting me here today, and hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
A friend of mine said, don't worry about it, not everything's going to go as planned. They didn't leave for any other reason other than a dryer fire up in Larchmont with a smoke condition on the inside. So, our next speaker is living in Cinnaminson, New Jersey. Spent 24 years with the Fire Department of New York. He was appointed in 1977 and retired in 2002. And he retired as a sworn fire marshal with New York City Fire Department, with the Fire Department of New York. And he was there at the site throughout the events of 2001, September 11th. I'd like to invite to the podium Fire Marshal Frank Lukowski.
This was the morning, exactly. So good morning, brothers, fire departments, police officers. As Chief Evans said, I was fire marshal, firefighter, New York City, FDNY, from '77 to 2002. I'd like to thank everyone that's here, mostly my family, for putting up with some weird behavior in the last 16 years. The Mount Laurel Fire Department, we lived here around the corner for a couple of years. Extremely dedicated. The PD, extremely dedicated. You have to remember, the fire department, police department, EMS, is the last line of civil defense. You're the ones that are crawling down a hallway in a burning building, racing to a scene with possibly an active shooting situation, hostage, any type of crime scene. What I take to this is that people ask me, is that what you did for a living? Is that what you do for a living? It's not. It's who you are. And you go through the rest of your life knowing that it's who you are. I was only given 34 minutes to tell this. 3 or 4 minutes, I'm sorry. I'd like to spend a couple of minutes on the timeline. Honestly, it's not about me. I'll close this. I worked the night before. Ironically, I responded to the first bombing at the Trade Center. Did absolutely nothing. Sat at a desk liaison, fire department, other alphabet agencies, and went back into field investigation. The person I responded with was Fire Marshal Ronald Buca. Let me explain to you what the character of this gentleman was. He was in Rescue 1 in Manhattan. The fire department here knows, PD knows, that rescues in the New York City Fire Department is like the SWAT teams everywhere else. And a couple of years before 9/11, before he got promoted, I should say, in '92 with me, he was climbing the 5-story fire escape in Manhattan when the fire escape gave way, and he fell 5 stories trying to save brothers in the building. They said he would never walk again, pretty severely injured. He took that as a challenge, and he reconditioned himself, and within 1 year was back in the firehouse at Rescue 1. We got promoted together, and a few months later we went to the Trade Center together. He was a Special Forces warrant officer in the service, and from the moment I met him to the moment we left that morning to go to the towers, he told me that this was coming. A lot of people didn't believe him, but it bore out. The night before we worked, that morning, we're sitting in a building very much like this. It was a fire department facility, firehouse on the 1st floor, 2nd floor, and then 2 floors above it. My command was on the 4th floor of a 4-story building. At about 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning, I'm waiting for my day shift partner to arrive. I'll mention his name, Bill Wilson, because he doesn't get the credit also that he deserves. And we're sitting there, and the entire building shook. And for some reason I thought it was an accident because we're right on the street. So I thought it was an accident right in front of quarters. About a minute later, it comes over our dispatch system that aircraft into the World Trade Center. So Booker and I go up the staircase onto the roof, and we're about a mile away from the Trade Center. We were able to look directly into the hole, smoke coming out. So we both come down. We take opposite ends of 2 desks that we were in our squad room, and I called my wife. He calls his wife. Said, "Put the news on. Some accident just happened." And I hear him saying to his wife, "Terrorist attack, World Trade Center." So the 2 of us go down the elevator to the 1st floor, and here's the sequence of events. How some people are spared through the grace of God. The chaplain was talking about this before. We each had a set of keys and our gear, and my partner was going down the staircase, and as we were putting our gear into the car, my partner came out a minute late. And Buka said, "You take the 2nd car, we're going to go against traffic and we'll go down there." So Bill Wilson and I jumped in the 2nd car, and we're going against traffic south towards the Trade Center. We get about 2 blocks away, and that 1 minute allowed all of the other fire department, EMS, and other emergency response vehicles to catch up to us from whatever directions they were coming. So I pulled over to the side to let them through, and as the gentleman before me said, people were going back into the building. I'm thinking, this is very strange. People are going back, and we were preventing them, fire department was preventing them from going back in. And that's how I got stuck on the outside of the building. Buka ran to the 70-something floor with his partner. As the numerous times I was trying to get back into the building, injured people were coming out. And I had, again, by the grace of God, I had absolutely no choice but to help these people across the street to where the ambulances were now staging. And this went on. Never heard the second plane. Never saw it. All of a sudden, people were screaming. So now we have two buildings. I was around the corner when, if anybody knows the history of this, the fire department chaplain, Michael Drudge, was hit with debris and killed. And I watched them carry him around it. Never saw it. There were people being hit by the debris. Never saw that. Never in that place. Excuse me. To digress for a second, I read somewhere where public speaking is the second most feared phobia for people. For me, not being able to speak is my biggest fear. So, and to be honest, this is really the first time I've spoken about this. I don't go into the memorials into Manhattan. Don't judge me on that. I feel as though the men who deserved the recognition are the hundreds and hundreds of firefighters that climbed those stairs, got trapped in the buildings when they came down. I have so many, my mind is now racing back and forth. I want to tell you about all the men that I knew that were in that building. I knew personally. As a marshal, I went to all of the different firehouses throughout all the boroughs to do investigations. Met so many of them. I worked a small stint at the fire academy. That particular day, another circumstance that spared me was my partner and I are helping a lady across the street who was injured. And walking across, all the ambulances, the city EMT buses are now departed, and we're commandeering city buses, and we're filling up city buses. And I'm standing there waiting for the bus to roll up so we can move this lady around to the door, and I had my jacket off. And the bus driver sees me, and New York City fire marshals had police officer status. We carried a firearm, and he bus rolls right up onto me, bumps me on my right hip. The guy I thought he was going to have a heart attack. Just knocked me off to the left a little bit, apologized, but that extra 10 minutes getting those people in prevented me from going into Tower 2. So it's another circumstance where God said, today's not your day. About a week later, I was there for all that day, the next days. My command, again, that was just a few blocks away. They put us in charge of uniform identification. So for civilians that don't know what that means, is that everybody that was found at the site that was either fire department, police department, or the agencies had to go through us. I was there at the morgue when they brought Booker in. When they told us that Booker's turnout gear were not on him, but next to him, they revealed later on that after running to the 70-something floor, he draped his turnout gear over a civilian to protect it from the fire and debris. This is the heart. This is the courage of individuals that join the services, whether it's the military, your firefighters, or your police officers. Again, it's not what you do. When people ask you, you know it in your heart. It's who you are. Second generation New York City firefighter. My father did the better part of 30-something years. I intended to be on the job for much longer, and I tell people I had one bad day. This really is most wonderful, appreciative in my heart, the memorial and tribute to the New York City Fire Department. I'd like to thank all of the members of the Mount Laurel Police Department, the Fire Department for doing this, the officials, thank you, and may God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
As you can imagine, David and Frank's stories don't get any more personal than that. I want to detour a little bit, and I want you to keep some people very important to all of us in your minds right now. And those are the people in Houston and in Florida right now with Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma. Our brothers and sisters and all those same services we're here in support of and to pay tribute and honor are right now not able to do what we're doing right here, right now, because they've put service and sacrifice above others. So I just have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world. And no one will keep that light from shining. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that's good and just in our world. From September 11th, 2001, President George W. Bush from the Oval Office. This memorial is a memorial of remembrance, so we shall never forget those who lost their lives, those who sacrificed their lives, and for those lives that are forever altered. I want to thank you all for coming today, taking time out of your busy schedules. I'd like to encourage you to read both plaques, and oddly enough, try and find discrepancies, problems. Those plaques are dedication boards right now. So you need to come back again in the future to see the final bronze castings when they're done. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank some people too that put today together. I'd like to thank Lieutenant Bukovic. Where are you, Dan? I'd like to thank Lieutenant Bukovic for coordinating today's events and all the staff at 363 and headquarters here that were able to pull this all together in short notice with other events going on this morning. Battalion Chief Alan Pine, would you all rise, please? Folks, I thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to come today. Please spend some time reading, reflecting, and remembering. I invite you inside to have some water and some pretzels, and also help us where you can to help maintain this memorial forever to come. There's large pictures from the flight from the deck of the World Trade Center, from World Trade Center 1 and 2. They're there for you guys to take with you today. Take one. There's a donation boot there to help the foundation. No obligation, but please take a picture home so you can do with it and you can remember, not just here, but in your everyday life. On behalf of the Mount Laurel Firefighters Foundation, the Mount Laurel Fire Department, Mount Laurel Fire District Number 1, and the Township of Mount Laurel, I thank you very much. Enjoy.
I want to take one of those pictures, one for John and my friend.